underestimate the other things.
But it's a bit for progressives to think, how can we influence this government? The question is, what do we think of how the Lib Dems are getting on? Because we're in opposition now, but opposition forces in society, political parties, trade unions, campaigning groups always have to influence the environment in which governments make decisions. And we have to remember that we actually won a battle of language in the last 5 years, where even the Conservative Party had to say, inequality, we want to reduce it. NHS spending, we want to increase it. International development, climate change, we believe in these things. These are very contested within the right, and they're contested within the government. But it's actually important to hold, I think, all of the parties to that being the centre ground of British politics. We know it's what everyone has to say. And then we want to know, does it have consequences? What the Liberal Democrats do is important as part of that. We can influence the government by challenging and opposing it, because it did retreat on school sport, because it couldn't explain why they were good cuts, and it had to reverse some of them, school milk, book start, and so on. So there are lots of ways I think we can campaign that aren't always about the Liberal Democrats. I do think, though, we should have this debate that's disagreeing with the Liberal Democrats about how well they're doing. We should, I think, change the tone of the way we have the discussion. I think it's legitimate for them to have chosen to join a centre-right government with that election result. In any way, it was their choice to make, and it's not for the Labour Party to tell them what to do. The question then of what are the consequences of that? My biggest worry is that on the claim that everything will be progressive and fair, distributionally so, and you end up in a big argument with the Institute of Fiscal Studies, one group of Liberal Democrats, including the party leader, is now saying graphs don't matter. You know, graphs are very abstract. Graphs aren't about what happens in people's lives. I think if you're failing the test of the graphs with the Institute of Fiscal Studies in terms of it hitting the poor harder than the rich, we want to hear people like you, Simon, saying, actually, we've got to change this now. You know, and then you'll have allies on the other side. So quite that. I think there's a debate within the Liberal Democrats about whether, in a sense, you know, being against the state is the thing that Liberals share with Conservatives, or whether the social Liberal tradition has always had a nuanced view of the state in favour of civil liberties, and Labour can learn on that, but also actually saying liberty is autonomy and the state has to get involved to give people the autonomy. That's why we support young kids who wouldn't stay on at school. So I hope we can make calls on those things. Look, I think we should treat issues on their merits. I'm in favour of things the government wants to do, often where the right hates what it wants to do, development, spending, climate change. Europe, which I think is probably the biggest issue the governing parties disagree about. I think we should get involved in those debates. But Simon, a number of people in your party are now saying we want to be an independent party. We don't want to become a centre-right party that's an appendage of David Cameron. If you want to be an independent party, I think, as well as cooperating in Parliament, I think we should now have more cooperation outside Parliament on thinking about long-term issues in our society. Wealth and inequality gaps, what happens in the education system. You've challenged the private schools recently in terms of what they do on education. I'm talking about what happens in terms of private school. Let's have those debates actually with Labour and Liberal Democrat people. Let's disagree about what's happening with the coalition government, but let's actually try and cooperate to shift British politics to the centre-left, not to the centre-right. But let's not have leading Liberal Democrats, in a sense, taking out centre-left propositions like redistribution mattering. So I hope you'll challenge that within your own party.